Well, this is General ASE Practice Test number 5. And we got 10 questions and the answers are in the second set of slides. And so let's jump into this first one here. This guy posted this video on Facebook. I don't really know him, but he is on, I think he posted it on the Automotive Insights page or something. But the long and the short of it was he had this video just like you see it right here posted. And a lot of the times whenever you post something like that and you're asking for a serious answer, you get answers that are just all over the map. You know, so nobody really had what I considered was the right answer, but at the end I'll tell you what I told him I thought it was. In the meantime, tell me what you think his problem is, because this is kind of unusual if you get right down to it. Question 2. Customer says, with no prior issues, when the key is turned to start, the starter drive gear suddenly started clashing with the ring gear teeth. It was like it was bouncing off of the teeth before it ever, it was able to mesh with the teeth and spin the engine. Question 3. A starter begins to spin the engine and then whines. When it does this, the engine is very hard to start. So we're talking about is that broken flex plate teeth, unbalanced armature, bad overrunning clutch, or solenoid voltage drop? Question 4. The complaint is that the AC isn't cooling. The smartest first step is to A, identify the refrigerant charge, B, check high and low side pressures, C, measure airflow temperature, or D, check compressor operation. Question number 5. Engine misfires right after a cold engine start, but clears up within 20 seconds. What's the best next step? You replace all the plugs, check the plugs after a 10-second run, check all cop coil resistances, or measure running compression. Question 6. The transmission fails to engage when put in drive or reversed at first start of the day, but does okay when it's warm. Do we pull all the ECM, TCM codes, adjust shift cable links, do an ECM, TCM table reset, or check transmission fluid level? Question 7. A customer rings their vehicle in for a front brake job, and your guy disassembles the brakes after he sees this. This is before you get over there to where he's working. And then you give the customer an estimate, and they decline all repairs. What should you do now? Put them back just like they were, fix it right or disable the vehicle, have the customer sign a waiver, or notify their insurance company? Question 8. An AC system has high suction pressure and low high side pressure. Refrigerant charge too low, compressor not pumping, orifice tube restricted, or cooling fan relay stuck on. Question 9. Conventional O2 sensor shows lean on the scan tool, but is measured with a DVOM. The voltage is 2.29 volts. What's the most likely cause of this? Is it a misfire on that bank, a rich exhaust mixture, a failed O2 sensor heater, or a poor O2 sensor ground? Saline Mustang shows plus 10 long fuel trim on bank 1 and minus 10 long fuel trim on bank 2, but fuel trims normalize at higher engine speeds. Is this rust particles in one side of the fuel rail, one camshaft out of time by one tooth, torn air filter, contaminated mass airflow sensor, a slightly restricted bank 1 catalytic converter? Now let's see if we can plow into our answers here. We've been here just under 5 minutes. It's going to take a little longer to go through the answers because it usually does. This, what I told the guy, it sounds like the starter is spinning the flywheel, but the engine's not spinning.
Do it again. See, there's nothing spinning here, so we're spinning there. And it's like the flywheel has completely come loose from the crankshaft.
That was a busted flywheel. And I told him it sounds like the flywheel's spinning, but the engine's not. And somebody said, could you tell me how this is even possible? And I said, well, if the flex plate breaks right around the bolt circle, that's what you're going to have. And, you know, and of course now if it just cracks, you'll start out with a ticking noise, but if people keep ignoring that, it eventually breaks completely, and then you wind up with the crankshaft just sitting there, and the flex plate and the torque converter that's bolted to it just, you know, spin freely whenever you spin it and all. So that was I don't know how that's going to play out or what the final answer was, but based on what I heard in that first video that I showed you, this was something he had going on, which is unusual, but not, you know, that hard to figure out. If the engine's not moving when you spin the starter, but you can hear it making an even sound with no compression, think about it. Customer says, with no prior issues, when the key is turned to start, the starter drive gear suddenly started clashing. That's a bad starter. Believe it or not, I ran into that on my Taurus. And what's so weird about that is technically this electrical connection should not even be made until the gear engages with the flywheel. It's designed that way. So this lever is going to throw that forward, and it's going to engage with the flywheel, and the teeth on the starter are chamfered a little bit, and it just kind of jittering and bouncing off the teeth because it starts spinning before it ever engages with the flywheel is a theoretical impossibility. But I experienced that on my Taurus, and it was about 3 weeks after I had replaced the starter. The starter was worn out, you know, it did the click thing, and I had to tap it to get it to start and all that because it had a lot of miles on it. Put a starter on it from Advanced Auto Parts, drove it for 3 weeks, no problem. One day, I got in it to go home without warning. It was making out. I said, ooh, I don't want that to happen too many times or I'm going to have flywheel issues. Or, you know, flex plate if you want to be stickler for that, you know, for the semantics on that. But anyway, as it turned out, I had to put another starter on it to fix that. So something, I didn't, say I would have done forensic examination of that if I didn't have the starter to replace, you know, I had to give the starter back for a, you know, for a defect and all that. But this one here was a bad starter, and that's what I ran into there. All right, now this one right here is an overrunning clutch issue. That's what it is, and if it does it, it's really hard to start because it'll spin. I mean, it used to be really bad to do that on Fords, but this right here, the one that I'm showing you the picture of, it did this on a Chevrolet engine that we had on the stand over there, and it was a perfect opportunity for me to show that. The complaint is the AC is not cooling. The smartest thing to do is see if it's energizing the compressor clutch. In other words, if the compressor clutch clicks in and is the compressor spinning, that's the first thing I want to know. Now you can check pressures and do all this other stuff, but if that compressor is not engaged in spinning, you're totally wasting your time because you need to, that's the first smartest step, is look down there and see what you see. One time there was 85 Buick that came in, and they said the air conditioner wasn't cooling. And I says, all right, we're going to see if this compressor clutch engages. And I told Jerry, this guy that was he was in his mid-40s, he was laid off from the cotton mill and all that. And this was back in about 2001. I says, go in there and turn on the air conditioner. And so he went in there and sat in the car for a while, and he got out and he said, I don't guess I know how to turn the air conditioner on this car. So I went in there and sat down and looked at it, and I said, I was rubbing my chin like he was. And it took me a second or two to figure it out, but that 85 Buick Riviera had a CRT screen in the middle of the dash that did everything, and you had to select the AC it was a touch screen, you know, old, you know, thing. But anyway, that was wacky. Why that thing, you know, you sit there and you just see a CRT screen in the middle of the dash when you're used to seeing, you know, levers and stuff. And he was confused, and I was too to start with, because I had never seen that at that time, and it was an '85 model Buick. But you need to find out why the clutch is not engaging. That's the first and foremost thing. All right, on question 5, what you want to do, this is right after a cold engine start, right? So you're gonna it misfires right after a cold engine start, but clears up within 20 seconds. That's the best next step. Check after it, switch it off while it's still skipping. Pull the plugs out and see which one's wet. Now I will tell you that a caveat here is, in a lot of cases, if you've got a dripping injector, it will cause it to start hard rather than just skipping when you first start it. Or you can have some of both of that. But I've seen one dripping injector cause one to just spin and spin and spin and spin, and then, you know, whenever it would ordinarily you just breathe on the key and it fires up. If it spins real hard, and then it starts, and you put your fuel pressure gauge on it, and you see the fuel pressure slowly weeping out of there, then that's an injector is suspect to be leaking, one or more of them. If you pull the injectors out, you're going to see that the one leaking, the tip of it is washed clean, but the ones that aren't leaking are dirty. That's how that works. And that was my rule of thumb. Now, here's the other thing. If it's a hot soak skip that goes away after about 30 seconds, you're going to get it hot, switch it off, and let it skip. You know, while it's still skipping, you got to switch it off while it's still skipping. Pull all the plugs out. You'll see one of them steaming, or you'll see indications also that it's been getting antifreeze on that plug. That's a head gasket issue or cracked head, something like that. The stupid thing was, back in the mid-90s, Ford had these Windstars that had these engines in them, the 4.2 liter engines or whatever, that V6. And the thing was, except I think that was a 3.8, but it was the same platform as a 4.2. I don't remember exactly, but it was basically the same engine in my pickup truck. And on those vans, that V6 engine was giving issues with the number 4 cylinder head gasket area. It would blow that head gasket. And because they had a program where we were supposed to go in there and do a compression test on every cylinder to make sure that it didn't have a blown head gasket. That didn't make any sense to me, because the way the head gasket blows, you'll practically never find that with a compression test. But some brilliant service engineer decided that's what we needed to do on all those vans. And you know, those vans, those plugs on the back side are hard to get to. Well, my helper and me did so many of those compression tests. We pull every plug, we did compression test every cylinder, we put them all back in there, put it all back together. We got so good at that we could do a compression test on one of those Windstars with that sideways V6 in it in 18 minutes. We really got fast. The more you do something, the faster you get at it. You know exactly what you got to do, and exactly how much force you got to apply, and which tools you need, and all that kind of thing. And of course, we used air ratchets to pull the plugs out, you know, that kind of stuff. But and when we would start the plug with a piece of hose or a spark plug boot, and then ease them back in there with an air ratchet after we got that. That's made sure they were started and screwed in there as far as you could with your finger and all that. But anyway, that's what we do here. Transmission fails to engage when put in drive or reverse at first start of the day, but goes okay when warm. Check the transmission fluid level. The easiest thing first, most of the time. Now, you can have some of the older transmissions used to have what they call morning sickness, where the torque converter would lose all of his, the fluid would drain out the torque converter, and they put some check valves in the cooler lines to put a stop to that. And so you didn't hardly ever see that on anything new, you know, because they got it fixed where it can't lose the fluid, won't drain out of the torque converter overnight. But anyway, you check the transmission fluid level. Have to have the engine running, and you need to have it If you check it when it's cold, a lot of the dipsticks, if you have one with a dipstick, if you don't have one with a dipstick, you're gonna somebody with that knows how to check the fluid on one without the dipstick on that particular one. It's not the same procedure on every one of these. On the Dodges and stuff, you gotta have a special dipstick that's a tool that you take a cap off of the dipstick tube, shove it down in there, and it goes straight into the pan. You measure how many millimeters deep it is at a certain transmission temperature and all that. But cold and warm transmission fluid are going to be at a different level, because transmission fluid, unlike engine oil, expands considerably when it gets hot. But that's what you got to do. I'd check transmission fluid first, because most of the time you're going to find it low. Also, if you're driving one and you make a turn pretty sharp and the transmission neutralizes and it catches again, that's fluid sloshing away from the pickup screen. Customer brings their vehicle in for a front brake job and your guy disassembles the brakes after he sees this. You better fix that thing right or disable the vehicle. If it's unsafe to operate, you can repair it to where it's safe, or disable it so it can't be driven off your property in a dangerous state. Even if you have the customer sign a waiver, that doesn't protect you from being sued and losing a lawsuit. This has happened. And so the smartest thing you can do, we had one like this one time that the lady brought it in there, and she, I made her an estimate before she ever brought the car over there. And I says, if it needs rotors and pads, unless it needs calipers or something, it's going to cost this much money. And so the parts guy didn't ask me if it had ABS or not, which was doofy, because if it has ABS and it needs rotors, the rotors cost a lot more. And so this thing had none of the caliper hardware was in place, and it was sort of patched up. It didn't look as bad as the one in my photo here, but it was bad enough to where we couldn't put it back out there like it was. And so we went ahead and just fixed it right. But I had to call her and say, look, after we got it fixed, he told me, the parts guy said, well, the rotors you're going to have are going to cost a lot more money. So the original estimate, which was like $125, ballooned out to about $250 because of the difference in the cost of the rotors and a $25 hardware kit I had to get to put the calipers back on there right. So it was kind of funny, because the lady sent her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend over there to pick it up, and she sent them with a check they were supposed to fill out to pay the bill. And so when the girl got there, see, I figured, it's one of those forgiveness is better than, looking for permission. Because if I told the woman, look, it's going to cost $250, and she said, I don't want that, then we couldn't put the vehicle out there the way it was, because it was the missing hardware and all this kind of thing. And so we just went ahead and fixed the brakes. And I figured, well, if she throws a screaming fit and all that kind of thing, one way or another, she's going to have, the brakes are going to be working right when this thing leaves here, or whatever happens, whoever pays the bill. So she called her mother on my office phone, because that was before the days of cell phones. And her boyfriend was standing there behind her. He was kind of a big, heavy-set guy, And and this girl was so deadpan. She told her mother, she says, okay, this bill is going to be $250 instead of $125. And you could hear her mother's voice shouting out of that phone. I mean, it was so bad I was surprised the girl didn't pull the phone away from her head. But the boyfriend was standing behind her, and apparently he knew the mother, which I had never met her. I didn't have any FaceTime with her. I just talked to her on the phone, and she sent the work order over there and all. But it was funny, because whenever the girl's mother was screaming and hollering and shouting at her on the phone, her boyfriend looked at me with his pained look on his face, shaking his head, said, not good, not good. She wrote the check. They took the vehicle. Everybody had good brakes, and it was a safe situation. I didn't turn it loose with cruddy brakes the way that it came in there, because we don't want to have anybody crashing and then coming back and suing us. Question: AC system has high suction pressure and low high side pressure. This is a bad compressor, a weak compressor. This is the way it's supposed to look. Normal warm pressure on a warm to hot day. Now, this is sort of a, you're going to have higher pressures on both sides. In other words, you may see this one here up here and this one here farther over there on a really hot day, like it's 100 degrees out there. But if it's a cooler day, like if it's like 65 degrees, this is going to be lower and this is going to be lower too, because pressure and temperature are heavily connected on this. So that's your weak compressor syndrome right there whenever you see the, and typically if you've got a weak compressor, these needles won't just be riding up here smooth, they'll be bouncing really hard and really fast. One or more of them will, because you know, there can be a bunch of reasons why the compressor doesn't work right, but that's what that means. Conventional O2 sensor shows lean on the scan tool, but measured with a DV on, the voltage is 2.29 volts. I have seen this in the real world. A bad connection here, or on the older ones, if the oxygen sensor ground went to the cylinder head, you'll show if your meter really high voltage measuring it, and you're thinking that doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be between 0 and 1 volt. And over here, on the normal sensor, you're going to read, you know, it's going to be switching back and forth. But this one right here would read high, and on a scan tool, it would say it was lean. So it would read high, but it would say it was lean. And so that's going to be a poor O2 sensor ground. That's what that's going to be. And like I say, I've seen that before. It sort of throw you if you're not used to it. Question 10. Now this is a booger here. The Saline Mustang shows 10 degrees long fuel trim on bank 1 and negative 10 degrees long fuel trim on bank 2, but fuel trims normalize at higher engine speeds. That's going to be one camshaft is out of time by 1 tooth. Now you can really open a can of worms and get into the weeds on this one here. But that just about always points to mechanical imbalance between banks, not a shared sensor or fuel issue. Saw this too at the Ford dealer. The guy put a Saline Mustang back together and the fuel trims were out of balance at idle, but they normalized, and so it turned out when he got it digging back in there that he had it 1 tooth out of time. And you know, see your colored link, there's a tooth out there, but this colored link is lined up like it should be. All right, now the next slide is going to have some information. You're going to say, well, what if it's retarded 1 tooth instead of advanced 1 tooth? Tell me about that. So here we go. Camshaft advanced 1 tooth, bank goes positive. You can read the words. I'm not going to read the words to you. You can freeze this slide, read the words, check up on this, tell me if I got it wrong. You know, some of you gearhead engine dudes. This is basically how that's going to operate. And I wanted to make sure you had this. I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide so you'll have time to read that. Or you can freeze it, like I say, and read it. And there it is for what it's worth, you know. Okay, well, that finishes us up. Go fix things, and let me know how you did on this, and I'll talk to you guys next week. We've been here 22 minutes and 40 seconds.